This is a really broad topic, and obviously you need more than 1 hour to discuss and make sure, not just discuss, but take action on this topic. But we've got about just under an hour to hear from a really good group of panelists. Amazing. Well done to Mirella and Janelle and everybody who's been able to put that panel together. The diversity needs to be addressed at various levels. We need that talent to come from everywhere around the world, males, females, and others. So the ACS also has a flagship publication called the Digital Pulse. And last year, 2018's stats basically say in the professional workforces, women make up 45%. And in the tech industry, it's 28%. What's really sad is this 28% hasn't changed since 2015. So not only we are behind, but we haven't also improved. So there's a lot to be done to make sure that we have and we increase the female participation in the tech industry. And it's also a problem that is there in the startup ecosystem. As many of you would know, the ACS has recently acquired River City Labs, which is Steve Baxter's startup incubator in Brisbane, and we're taking it across the country. And therefore, we're playing a real active role in the startup ecosystem too. And in the startup ecosystem, the recent Startup Muster report noted that 57 of the respondents mentioned that they have less than 30% female workforce. And 38% reported that they have 0 female participation. So certainly that's another area we really need to get into and make sure that we increase the female participation. And as I said, diversity is broader than gender, and there are many ceilings. You've heard of the glass ceiling, the bamboo ceiling. I don't know, I was trying to look for I'm a brown person, so I was trying to look for a curry ceiling or something, but didn't quite find anything yet. But there are many ceilings that people need to break through. And also, not just breaking through that, but every action that we take, we need to make sure we mean it. It's not just tokenism, and it's not just having females and coloured people around and disabled people and whoever else around just so that it looks good, but we really mean that, and you really want to make sure that you develop that talent and you're attracting them because you want a diverse opinion and you want to make sure you genuinely care about talent. So that's enough from me. I think it's my honour to introduce the panellists. I'll introduce the panellists and I'll join with them on stage for a couple of questions just to warm them up so that you can get your questions to the panel, ready. First, we have Libby Lyons. Libby is the Director of the Workforce Gender Equality Agency, overseeing the statutory reporting processes that gathers gender equality data from more than 12,000 employers and covering more than 4 million employees. So that's a big area that she's covering. And Libby's initiated development of a strategic plan focused on maximising the agency's world-leading data set and expanding the reach and impact of gender reporting nationally and internationally. And she's spoken globally, and most recently she has spoken to the United Nations Commission on the status of women in New York last year. And recently Libby featured in the 2000 Women Who Changed the Way You See the World, as well as Apolitical's 100 Most Influential People Working in Gender Policy in 2018. Congratulations and welcome. The next panelist is Lily Viertmann. Lily is the CFO and Chief Risk Officer at the ABS. I was going to say Australian Bureau of Statistics, but I'm like, we're in Canberra, everybody knows what ABS is. So Lily's got over 20 years experience in financial management in the Commonwealth and in state public service. Lily's held senior executive roles with Queensland Treasury, DMO, Workplace Authority and Department of Environment. And Lily is also a Fellow of the CPA Australia and a finalist in the 2012 ACT Telstra Women's Awards. Please welcome Lily. The next panelist is Francis Owusu. Francis is the owner of Culture Break. Francis is a leading speaker, mentor, coach, and a youth change initiator, and he offers personal and unique perspectives fueled by his own experience and strong desire to help and unlock people's potential. As a result of all his enduring commitments to the young people in Canberra, Francis was honoured with the 2013 Australian of the ACT Local Hero Award. And adding to this was his selection to the ACT government's one of the 14 influential people in Canberra to act as a champion in an exclusive leaders advisor group designed to develop Time to Talk 2030, Shaping Canberra's Future campaign. Welcome. And our final panelist for this morning is Clare Moore. Clare is the CEO of Women with Disabilities ACT, a systemic advocacy and peer support organisation for women, girls, feminine identifying, non-binary people with disability in the ACT region. They're passionate about promoting visibility and inclusion of people with disability, particularly within the feminist movement. They're part of the Disability Leadership Institute and 2019 Women's March Organising Committee. Clare was the winner of the 2018 Chief Minister's Inclusion Award for Emerging Young Leader. Welcome, Clare. I'll start off with you, Libby. The ACS believes in order to truly begin to address the diversity as a broader picture, you've got to really have a whole of population view, and we've got to learn from people who are doing really well, such as you and your organisation. So could you take us through some of the approaches the Workplace Gender Equality Agency takes to advancing gender equality nationally?
Thank you. Oops, I forgot to press the button. That's it, that's better, thank you. And if there's an engineer out there who would like to design a microphone for women that doesn't need a lapel and a belt or whatever, I would be really grateful, and I think there'd be lots of women around the world who'd be really grateful. So the Workplace Gender Equality Agency was set up in 2012 as a result of the Workplace Gender Equality Act. So in essence, we're a regulator because we collect data. It's mandatory that every organisation in Australia with more than, in the private sector, with more than 100 employees report into us every year on 6 gender equality indicators. So we've now collected 5 years of data and we are a regulator. But rather just looking at enforcing the legislation, we work in partnership and collaboration with organisations to improve the gender equality statistics, if you like, and help them, educate them, provide them with tools to put strategies in place to address gender inequality in their workplace. And it is the Gender Equality Agency. So this is about women and men. Because in order to move the dial, in order to address the historic disadvantage of women in the workplace, we need to engage men, and men need to change and think differently about the workplace as it is today. We provide education, support and information. And I think the interesting thing about now having 5 years of data is that we're starting to develop a real picture of what is happening in Australian workplaces. And through the data, we are now starting to get hard evidence as to what works and what doesn't work, as to where we are going in the future. We work a lot with other research institutes who use our data to get some of these deeper insights. And for instance, on Friday we launched a report with the Bankwest Curtin Economics Centre that took our 5 years of data and came up with some good news and some bad news. The good news is that in some management categories we will reach parity. Women and men will be in equal numbers in the next 10 years. In management overall, we should get there in 20 years. But ladies, if you want to be a CEO, in order to get parity there, a baby born today will be over 80 before we reach parity at that CEO level. So that's the beauty of the data. It can give us those insights. It also tells us the sorts of things that we need to do to get there and the barriers that people are facing. And in terms of the CEO, the other thing this report told us was that at CEO level, and if you look at this is looking at the data of more than 10,000 organisations and 4 million employees, in that top 10% of managers, there is a pay gap of at least $160,000. That's the difference between the pay that men are getting and the pay that women are getting in those top 10% of roles. Now, money's not everything. Not everybody is motivated by money. But I tell you what, to take on a big job as a CEO where I'm fully accountable and responsible for an organisation, money provides a little bit of an incentive. And if I'm a woman and I think that I'm going to get $160,000 less per year than a male doing a similar job, I think that's a disincentive. So this is the power of the data. It's telling us stories, and we need to continue to collect it. And the other thing that I would say is we are the only country in the world that is collecting the depth and breadth of data about what is happening in Australian workplaces. We need to be proud of that. So often in Australia, we hit ourselves around the head and say we're not doing things right and we're not doing it well, but we are. And we are leading the world. Chile, for instance, who we've been working with, are drafting up legislation based on ours for mandatory reporting. So let's be proud of that, and let's use the data to tell the stories to help us make change.
Thanks, Libby. That's excellent. I really like to hear how Australia's leading the way in this space. Congratulations. Lily, you've got great success with the ABS, being recognised as the federal public sector's champion of flexible working, and you've already been able to have some really good tangible benefits out of it. So how did you meet the diverse expectations of the workforce? I know, for example, my day job, we're going through a similar process and making sure we offer a flexible workplace, but it's different things for different people. So, and how did you guide your organisation through this transformation to make it so much of a success?
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Yohan. Morning, everyone. First, in the ABS, we adopted what we call the Flexibility First program. So the default is why not flexible work instead of only in certain special circumstances. So what I'm about to say, some of this is going to sound a bit cliche and you've heard them before, but it was very, very important that we consult. So we are an organization of about 2,500 to 3,000 people. And when we actually do census, we could recruit up to another 30,000 field officers. So it is a large organization. But as part of the change, we had to make sure that we do consult widely. We are dispersed, so we have offices in states and territories. And obviously it was very, very important to listen. I keep hearing an echo here. Right. Sorry, a bit of a pause. Okay, can you hear me a bit better? Yeah. So it was very important that we actually go out, talk to people and listen to what they have got to say. What we did initially was commit to a pilot. You know, everybody talks about agile, the agile approach, so I suppose that's what we did. So we started small, we started with one state office, we piloted, we learned from that, we evaluate, and then we improve. We kept improving as we did our rollout. Now, it was also very important to make sure that people understand that when we were piloting, if it doesn't work, we would then be prepared to roll it back. So that was the commitment we gave our staff. We also gave people a lot of latitude. So, you know, it's up to them how they decide how they want to work in their group. There are some things that, you know, we gave people the freedom to choose, but there were other things that were non-negotiable. So for example, we did want people to move around. We didn't want people to just sit in the same spot every day, because then that defeats the purpose of, you know, collaboration and working in a more flatter way. So we tried to meet the expectation of our staff in terms of providing them with the equipment, but also, so that was the gift from us, but the take would be we require that people don't work at the fixed desk. So you don't come in the morning and work in the same position every morning. And we treated, you know, people with special needs. We had a conversation with them right from the beginning. It was a one-to-one. So we knew everybody who had special needs, and we had a plan for them. We train our managers as well as our staff. So it's not just a matter of training a staff in terms of how we work in the environment, but it was very, very important that we took managers on that journey as well. So we communicated basically through our EL2 or our directors cohort, because I think research shows that they are the people that the staff listen to most. So if there was anything we wanted to communicate, we worked through our EL2s. They were very, very important to us. So in terms of some of the organizational change, I'm very happy to report that, you know, we had our recent staff survey actually showed that 88% of our staff are satisfied or very satisfied with their ability to access flexible working environment. So there was a high level of satisfaction. It was embraced by the majority of the staff, and now it is basically a retention and an attraction strategy for the ABS, because as an organization, we're probably not the highest paying employer, but this is what we are able to provide for our staff. It also requires that management have a shift in their mindset. So instead of being thinking about just presenteeism, that people are actually physically present at work, we're now thinking about what are they actually achieving. Regardless of where they work, what are they actually achieving? What are the outputs and outcomes that we're seeing? It has improved our trust in the organization, and when I move around and visit the different state offices, it's often heartwarming to hear about the stories people tell me. They say, oh, look, you know, now that we're sitting with our colleagues, you know, we are collaborating a lot better. I'm learning more about different aspects of the business. And, you know, the other day I heard somebody talking about, like, for example, the privacy team was saying to me, I was sitting with a group and I overheard them talking about something, and I was able to say, did you know that, you know, this and that about the Privacy Act, and this is how we can help you. So I think it's really improved collaboration in the organization. People are also more accepting about being able to work not just, you know, from home, but also geography is no longer a barrier. What we actually do also is, I think we've been able to increase our part-time participation from our workforce, because people now, some people are working 1 or 2 days a week from home. So some of us spend a lot longer traveling. We're really blessed in Canberra in a sense that, you know, nowhere is really that far. But in, you know, places like Melbourne and the bigger cities, people have been able to save on the commuting time, and hence being able to, you know, increase their hours. The other thing we found was that with some of the severe weather events that have happened, you know, recently, we were lucky that we were able to maintain productivity and at the same time keep our staff safe. So we've said to people, go home early before the storms hit, or if we know the weather was going to be particularly bad, don't worry about coming in, but log in and work from home. So I think it has been a win-win, not just for our staff, but for the organisation.
That's very good. I think there are certainly a lot of lessons for everybody to take away. So that sort of breaking down the silos and bringing people together and almost having multidisciplinary teams within ABS. So not adds to increased in diversity, understanding, but also innovation and everything else. So well done. Francis, my question to you is, in your opinion, what are some of the main barriers to employment in Australia for the younger generation? You're an advocate for younger generation. What are some of the barriers for the younger generation to get into the workforce?
Well, I guess it's quite a complex question to answer, and I guess the time frame we have is only so much you can talk about. And I think it also depends on who you're talking to. I know when I've travelled around the country, if I'm talking to young people in Bourke, it's a different scenarios versus talking to people living in parts of suburban Australia. So I guess in my response, what I'll be thinking of is trying to answer this question in two parts. One is in regard to some data that's out there, research, and the other is in terms of my work I do with my organisation Culture Break, which is around how do we improve the well-being and inclusion of young people and their future outlook in life. So we look at some of the research that's out there, and I think of the Foundation of Young Australia research that came out last year that indicated with the 20-something-year-olds that 31% of young people are either unemployed or underemployed, which is quite a significant number. And we relate to dollar terms in terms of our GDP. It equates about $15.9 billion of lost productivity. And then we throw in, on top of that, $7.2 million that goes into combating mental health, which we know has a significant impact on unemployment in young people. You see there's a number of significant barriers there. And then in that report, they highlighted four main areas they highlighted were significant barriers to young people employment. The first one was it comes to work experience. Despite having people have access to internships, I know in our programs, some of our program, big picture programs, things that encourage young people to get work experience, so ASBAs and things like that. Still about alarming 75% of young people feel that they don't have the adequate vocational and work experience to attain a full-time job. So that's number one of the first barriers. The next barrier is around education. A lot of young people feel, 50% of young people feel they don't have the right technical skills to attain a full-time job. And so despite the fact that figures show that there are more young people undertaking tertiary courses than not, there's still that barrier when it comes to education. A third area is interviewing skills. The report showed that only 1 in 4 young people feel confident when it comes to going for management and for employment and getting a full-time job. And the fourth area is, I guess, this sense of not enough jobs. So, this with the media in particular, so a lot of heavy media persons talking about automation, downsizing, all these things. Young people are feeling more uncertain about their job opportunities and feeling that is a significant barrier in the workplace. So, we look at those kind of things, and they reflect back into some of our work that we've done with Culture Break for the last 16 years, which is around how do we enhance the sense of identity, the sense of value, because I really see, what I've seen is that when people have the sense of value, it affects their level of confidence, which then affects their level of output, or how they see their opportunities when it comes to employment. And so when young people feel the sense that they're not worth, less, I guess, sense of value is diminishing, their confidence goes down, and then they don't have the confidence to take on what they can perceive as risks into going to employment, into taking on challenges. And so I really feel that what the significant barrier I've seen in the workplace and sense of for young people in deployment is that sense of identity and confidence, that sense of value, sense of about to express themselves, express about to feel confident about themselves. And I've seen with some of the work that we're doing, on the surface, some of the stuff we're doing, people say, well, you guys are really just providing dance and music opportunities for young people. But really what we are doing underneath that is building that sense of confidence, the sense of that you're okay, the sense that you have something to offer, that you can achieve and be successful, you can attain, you can aspire and acquire opportunities that will help you improve your employment outcomes. And so one of the initiatives that we're doing right now, which we're partnering with the CIT, is to use the creative space to provide qualifications for young people to attain Circ 3s and while they're part of the Year 12 certification. And looking at where we're going with the skills, where we know by 2030, 63% of all jobs are going to be soft skills intensive. So traditionally, when we look at the arts area and the creative area, I grew up where my parents said, great, you want to dance? Fantastic, get a real job. And so if you want to sing, fantastic. I mean, I spent 10 years being a part of a boy band. Now, you don't put that in your CV as part of getting an employment. Traditionally, you wouldn't put that. But what we see now is the skill sets that you learn, critical thinking, collaboration, teamwork, all these skill sets employers are now looking, and now as we're heading into employment, these become what we're traditionally seeing as barriers and now become opportunities for young people to skill and to overcome those significant barriers. So I really think that if we can, continue to focus on improving people's sense of value and worth and give them that confidence, I believe that these barriers that they may, where they're regardless of where they come from or what they're facing, can help them significantly overcome and attain better employment outcomes.
That's brilliant, Francis, and congratulations again on what you do with the kids in terms of bringing out their confidence and making sure that they find the value. I'm sure our sponsors, Michael Page, would be taking note, and I'm sure they're already pioneering in this space, looking beyond the CV and looking at the other extracurricular things such as dancing or whatever else, skills that people bring and the skills that add to their day job in their experience that they gain from such experiences. That's very impressive. And Claire, how long do you think that diversity policies are falling short? And how do you identify with marginalised identities such as women with disabilities, LGBTQI, people of colour, and what can we do about it?
So a lot of diversity policies are currently falling short for people who identify with multiple marginalised identities, and that's because we don't consider something called intersectionality, which is where people have this layered effect of discrimination. So in my work with women with disabilities, you have these interlayering effects of sexism and disability discrimination. And it's not just the sum of sexism and disability discrimination, it becomes a layered thing because they interact, they bounce off each other. And in some cases, when workers are in the workplace, they run into a problem, they feel like whilst you can address part of the problem because you've got a set policy for disability or a set policy for dealing with, say, sexual harassment, when those two interact, no one's not sure quite what to do. It's put in the too hard pile. So one of the things we need to start thinking about in diversity policy, in training managers, in training our HR reps is, okay, when someone comes in and they've got multiple layered marginalised identities, how are you going to make that person feel like they've got support? And that's an area where often the question is, I don't know. And it becomes a very complex place because people at that intersection end up having to explain it to employers over and over and over again. And it's a matter of making our diversity and inclusion policies kind of interact. It's not having a disability policy and a sexism policy. It's about having clauses in there that talk about when this multiple marginalisation, and having a person-centred focus. It's all about the individual. So what Lily was talking about with training your managers in being the ones who talk to their team, in delivering your flexible work program or whatever it is, in having that individual focus on people with whatever needs they might have. So if someone's having issues with the maternity policy because it doesn't accommodate all the extra appointments they have to deal with a medical issue, think about that. If someone's coming in and saying, well, I'm being bullied because I'm disabled, but I'm also a woman, so some of the things coming my way are a bit of both, you need to be able to go, well, that's wrong on 2 counts and we need to deal with it as multiply severe. So that's an area where I see that we're really falling short, an area I think all of us need to think about further. Yeah.
Thanks, Claire. We're off to the second round of questions, so hopefully you are very primed and have your questions ready. And this round will keep the answers to about 2 minutes. And also, I invite other panellists to jump in and contribute, so we need diversity of views and opinions. Libby, are there any strategies that workplaces should apply to avoid unconscious bias?
I think it comes down to the organisation, but it also comes down to the individual. So I think we need to challenge the assumptions about the way people work. And in the ABS and lots of other organisations embracing a flexible work program, you're starting to do that. But it's then incumbent on all of us to challenge the way we think about how people should work. You know, my favourite saying is presenteeism doesn't equal productivity. In fact, it's often the contrary. I think we have to challenge the fact that most of us think that flexible work is the domain of women. You know, women are the ones that have worked part-time in order to juggle their home and work responsibilities. No, flexible work is about men, and actually it's the take-up of flexible work by men that's going to help us all. I think the other thing is that we need to encourage organisations to look at how we're paying people. Analyse your pay data. And when we talk about a gender pay gap, I'm not talking about the legal responsibility that we all have to pay people the same, regardless of gender, for doing the same job. That has been a legal requirement in Australia for 4 decades. I'm talking about the organisational type pay gap that looks at the pay gap because you've got too many men in management and all the admin type roles and the lower valued, lower paid roles women take. That's the sort of pay gap that I'm talking about, how you even up that score. So I think we need to encourage all organisations to do that, and you as employees can encourage. Ask your organisation, what is our pay gap? Have we done an analysis? If we haven't, why haven't we? I think the other things that we can do is also acknowledge that we all have unconscious bias. We all do. Mine happens to be, I have an unconscious bias in that I don't like female doctors. Isn't that odd? But I discovered it when I moved house once and I had to find a new GP. So we all have them, and that doesn't affect you, it affects me, except if I'm on the board of a hospital and my job is to interview doctors. I've got to leave that bias at the door, or I've got to tell the others on the interview panel that that is my bias, so they challenge everything that I say or the decisions I make. So we've all got to acknowledge that. And I just think the other thing is it's about, and Claire mentioned it before, it's about holding people accountable. We need to train managers to embrace flexible work, to deal with people who go off on parental leave. And parental leave's not just about the women taking leave as well. So we need to challenge that, and we need to hold our managers accountable, but support them and train them to be able to deal with a flexible workforce. So I think they're the important things, but I think the most important of all is to understand what our own unconscious biases are, to acknowledge them, And when we're working and we're making decisions, they're top of mind for us.
Thanks, Libby. That self-awareness is very, very important. Lily, you spoke about the success of ABS in implementing the flexible workplace, but obviously, you would have come across some challenges. It wouldn't have been smooth sailing all the way through. So are you able to share a couple of the main challenges you came across and how you navigated them?
Sure. So it was a major change for the ABS, and with any change, I think it comes with it, there are people who are skeptical, there are people who are obviously fearful, and people are fearful for many reasons. Some people don't know how it's going to work, how it's going to impact on them. So I think part of what we tried to do in that journey, and I touched on this earlier, was to listen for what is it that people are afraid of, what are they fearful of losing. So as a result, part of that journey was we were able to draw out, there might be some things that people are losing. So for example, all EL2s no longer have offices. That's the loss. But what are some of the benefits? So in every organization, I always believe there should be give and take between the employer and the employees. So there were some things that people are going to lose, but there were some things that we provided back. So for example, we gave everyone a sit and stand desk. So everyone has that now. They have dual monitor screens. I might also add that IT played a really huge role in that change. So we have video conferencing equipment. We have laptops, so people take their laptops and they can work from anywhere. We use Skype. So it was a great partnership that we between IT and ourselves to be able to actually deliver the change. I think the other thing that I talked about earlier on was part of it is to celebrate the wins. So what we did was we got champions, so some of these people who started, early adopters, for them to actually tell their story. So they told their story and both, what were some of the challenges and what were some of the opportunities. I think it's really important to make it real for people, that, it doesn't just come across as this is all just upside, there's only one side of the story. Hey, it's all fantastic. Now that I'm doing flexible working, life is so different. But, there were challenges as well. So let people share that and make it real for people so that they can actually adopt that. The other key point I would say would be working very closely with HR. So in addition to working with our colleagues in IT, we work very closely with HR to make sure that there is alignment between the policy and the practice. So that partnership and collaboration, I think, position us in a very strong position.
Brilliant. Francis, what do you think our industry, which is the technology industry, can do to address the unconscious cultural and age bias when it comes to employment?
Well, I think I could probably echo something that Libby said about, I guess, first acknowledging that we all have unconscious bias in us. All, research shows that a lot of this is informed early in childhood, unconscious bias, and it comes from the home to the workplace. And so I think number one is acknowledging it exists, and acknowledging that we all have it. I think it says in one particular study, it says 90 to 95%. So in fact, everyone has it. And I can only talk, I guess, from my personal experience, that it's also about becoming self-aware as yourself that there exists unconscious bias towards yourself. I think with a lot of my growing up in, say, in Australia, being of African heritage, a lot of the unconscious bias I was unaware of. And so I'd go into certain situations, certain parts of my work, and I wouldn't realise it exists, and so I'll just take that as just how it is. So part of it is not only just acknowledging that you actually have it, but also the acknowledging that it's also towards you, because that actually is a part of empowerment. And so I think in your industry, I think number one, it's having that conversations. So we do have There are conscious biases from cultural and age. You know, we think when someone is young, we think they don't know enough. And when someone gets old, they can't do enough. And so, you know, you've got to get beyond to become aware of what those biases, unconscious biases, exist to certain cultural groups, to certain ages, even gender, and have, I guess, an ability to become open enough to hear the lived experiences of those people who are receiving those, or maybe unconsciously, you know, projecting it. And I think that sort of moving beyond tokenism to being genuinely engaged. I think the danger can often be is when you be like reactive and just almost like the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff and just, well, here's a band-aid solution to, we put a sign that says we are a diversity and inclusion organisation on the board, then we've sort of ticked the box. And it actually can become more damaging in some ways, implemented, because it can then sense that people feel disempowered, that, okay, we're saying, but it's not working. And so I think it's really important in your industry to have a conversation about becoming more self-aware that you project it and also you may be receiving it. Having, listening to lived experiences from those that, as well, and also then being really genuine in terms of how you're going to address and make policies and changes that are based off these lived experience rather than a band-aid solution that might come at the end as this is how we quick fix. Because it's not a quick fix, knowing that, you know, it's something that's well ingrained and across side, top to down. You can legislate everyone's equal, but we all know society is still unfair. So I think that's the challenge.
Thank you. Claire, we know sometimes affirmative action is necessary, and how do you think how do you think we can work around some of the backlash against positive action policies in the workplace?
So backlash against affirmative action often comes when you haven't got buy-in from people. It's really great to see, frankly, so many men in the room for an event like this, because it doesn't always happen. And people don't always see positive action as evening the playing field. They see it as an attack against them, and those are people coming from privilege. And usually when you mention privilege in front of people who are privileged, they feel attacked. And that's a result of not taking people on the journey. The good thing about having so many men in a room like this is you're all on the journey. You're understanding the background. You're understanding that disadvantage from the ground up and the why of this. And what you need to do, especially the managers in the room, is take people on the journey. Give them the background, give them the why of doing that diversity training. It's not just that it's mandatory. It's not just that it's written on the whiteboard. It's that these are people who have been disadvantaged, and we're evening up the playing field. And then make it about the fact that you are going to be working on a better team because of this. You're going to be working on a team that's more flexible, that has more perspectives, that's more able to address complex problems because you've got diversity, you've got different kinds of thinking. People from different backgrounds will come at problems in a different way, and when we're talking about agility and innovation and all these, well, some people say buzzwords, but they are real concepts. When we're talking about these things, what does that come from? It comes from diversity. It comes from a view of the world that isn't this set paradigm that's dominated the industry for the past few decades. And we need to be moving towards that. That will advantage this one grumpy person in the room because they'll be part of a better team. And if they want to move forward in their career, they want to be part of a successful team. So that's how you change the backlash. Take it off them and make it about being part of a successful team, because if it's on their territory, then they're going to win that argument because we like it when things are about us. So.
Thanks, Claire. Now, this is the moment I know all of you have been waiting for, and don't all of you put your hands up at once. But we have a couple of microphones here, and first question is from... Please put your hand up, just mention your name and where you're from, and the question to the panel. Or has the panel already answered all your questions? Surely can't be. Rupert.
I've got one. Rupert Grayston, I'm with the ACS. Now, as Yohan has mentioned, at the moment, blokes outnumber women in the ICT profession by 3 to 1, and we've got a need to massively grow the ICT profession in Australia. So we've got a problem, but I'm wondering about the rest of the workforce, because our research also shows that Australia needs a massive workforce reskilling towards digital skills. So what if the blokes also, through unconscious collective bias, what if the blokes uptake reskilling in digital by 3 to 1 also? We're going to have a massive workplace problem. So I'm wondering if the panellists feel that that's a likely scenario, and indeed what we might do about it.
Yeah, please, Claire.
So I'm a fairly recent uni graduate and did a bit of computer science here and there. And I can say that it's still definitely a problem that we're having a lot of students, even mature age students and people reskilling, they tend to be blokes. Or you get women coming in for the first semester and they end up leaving because there's still this pretty awful culture at an educational level. And so I'd say there's definitely a risk that we won't have as many women wanting to reskill, because there is still this pocket of culture within education that's pretty difficult to navigate for women. That's at least at the university level, I've found. It's a little different in the vocational education space from what I've seen. But I think that perhaps pressure from the industry might need to be applied to educational institutions to actually change that culture in order to retain the women that are trying to come into the industry, because women aren't staying in those education courses when they want to.
Libby?
I think there's also onus on employers here, and they have an obligation to look at reskilling their workforce dependent on the needs, and we are seeing that happen. And all of you would probably know MYOB. So as a result of doing a pay gap audit, they discovered that they had a pay gap, and they were shocked about that. And when they did the analysis and did some deep dives into the data, they discovered that they had a pay gap because every one of their coders were male, and coders happened to be paid on average more than the other employees in the organisation. So one of their employees actually came up with a solution, and the solution was to work with one of the tertiary institutes, and they developed an intense 16-week program in coding. They then advertised for applicants, focusing mainly on women who had been out of the workforce for some time, because a lot of these new jobs that are coming can actually be done anywhere at any time. So for women who've been out of the workforce for some time, who still have family and caring commitments, it's the perfect sort of job. They were inundated. They had something like 300 applicants. They've put 4 through, 3 are employed, and they're looking at starting their next training program. So again, it's about challenging the way we think and looking at the data in our own organisations to find out who's doing what and where we need to move things.
Yeah, Lily.
I might just add to that. I love all this talk about data, obviously coming from ABS. So I agree with the panelists that, the employers have a responsibility to, champion some of these and make the changes, but also to promote different models of working. We are, in this day and age, we have access to technology. We need to change, I think, our mindset. But I also feel that we all have the responsibility to promote this, right? In addition to just the employee doing a bit, we are mothers, we are fathers, we're brothers, sisters, we're uncles and aunts. What are we doing? in terms of encouraging the new generation to think about things differently. So I believe that we all have it in our power to make this change. And, you know, I'd like to encourage all of us, you know, for any change to happen anywhere, somebody has to speak out and somebody has to think about things differently. And we can be that somebody.
Thanks, Lily.
Francis. Yeah, I kind of agree with that. And I think in terms of the gender, the imbalance 3-to-1, I think when you're starting to address, we discover and find inequality, diverse and inclusion and equality, then I think at some point there needs to be some initiative that goes to addressing that. And whether it's being, you know, like you talk about the MILB situation where it was focused on women who have been unemployed, who are out of work for a while. And I think as a society at large, we need to not be afraid of those type of initiatives and be fearful, because often it seems to be, you know, at times it comes across, even I watched some comments on LinkedIn with this conference being put on, that somehow it is an attack on someone else for doing that. So it means that, in particular, you know, white males are under threat, you know, by this, or this particular group's under threat because of this initiative. I think we need, as a whole, if you're talking about disability inclusion or anything like that, that we don't think it's exclusion of, it's addition to. And so some of this, I think in the beginning, it maybe needs to be some initiatives that specifically address that, and then people embrace that as part of addition to, not a threat. And I think often we feel that this thing tinkers in, it's like, if you have this, you can't have this. And if you're addressing this, you must be an attack on this. And I think we need to be able to mature as a society and recognise, yes, this does exist. It does exist, and let's address it, and let's embrace it, and let's get behind that, because once you start to get more women involved in those programs, it then begins to be able to provide that I guess, pathway for more of engagement of women in digital technologies space.
Thanks, Francis. Thank you very much to the panelists. I know you may have some questions now, but the panelists will stay around for a little bit after we wrap up the session. So please approach them, ask your questions. Don't stop your conversations here. When I was preparing for the session, I wanted to get a sense of the audience today, and the demographics actually showed that over 60% of you are in managerial or leadership positions, which is fantastic. So, because I believe the leaders actually of any organisation have disproportionate influence in the decision making. And so when you go back, as the panelists, each and every one of them said, you can take actions. If there are programs at work, ask why. Why are we doing it? Again, as I started, is it to make up the numbers? Is it to make us look good? Or is there a real reason? And are we actually doing things to put those people in the right areas, in the decision-making areas? So that's really important. And I would also like to, before I wrap up, thank Michael Page. They could have done this on their own. We could have done this on our own, but together we are a lot more stronger than one. So well done to Michael Page for supporting this great session today, and everybody else. Please join me in thanking the panel before I pass on to Mirella.